good thing about this place, and I think our viewers know this, is mixing it up and interacting with each other all the time anyway, and that's going to continue. But I am going to miss this part of it, and I thank you for a wonderful show, and I thank you for being the thing that causes a whole lot of people to stick around and say, I'm going to give that Velshi a chance, because I really enjoyed that show that came before.
Oh, come on, Ali, you're being way too modest. People hang around because it's you.
Yes.
And the hard work you bring and the excellent shows that you deliver. We are sad to see you go on the weekends, but really happy to see you land at 11 p.m. Monday through Friday, bringing that alley magic.
Yeah, we might even stay up on Friday to watch your first show on Friday.
I will not.
There you go. I mean, that's a big ask. I think Jonathan's got an extra level of pleasure in this, because if I'm doing the 11 o'clock show on Friday night, that means he's not.
I double dog dare you to book the three of us, and we'll party through.
It would be my
7
pleasure and honor. You have an open invitation. Starts now. You have an open invitation anytime any of you want to be on. I spent a lot of time on primary nights with Eugene, just giving me all that information that all of a sudden makes me look real smart when I'm at the board. So I love you guys, and I thank you so very much for everything. And we'll see you a lot. And for the final time, Velshi starts now. And good morning to you. It is Sunday, June the 7th. I'm Ali Velshi. This week's seen a lot of twists and turns in the battle for control of the Senate in November. The pure math has always meant that controlling the Senate would be an uphill battle for Democrats. Republicans have 53 seats in the Senate. Democrats have 45. And there are two independents who caucus with Democrats, so it's basically 53 to 47. Democrats, in order to control the Senate, would have to gain 4 net seats. They could hold all the seats that they currently have and flip 4 Republican-held seats. They could also lose a Democratic-held seat, but flip 5 red seats. Anyway, it's hard to do. So here's our map of the key Senate battlegrounds. And there are lots of reasons why there are more numbers, more states on here than you'd possibly think, but they're colored by our race rating, from likely Democratic, that's darkest blue, to lean Democratic, lighter blue, to toss-up, which is yellow, to lean Republican, which is lighter red, to likely Republican, which is darker red. The 2 seats that Democrats really have to work to defend are Georgia and Michigan. At the moment, Georgia has Senator John Ossoff in it. This was thought of as a possible Republican pickup for a while, but Ossoff is feeling strong about holding on to his seat. Not only is he a prolific campaign fundraiser, but the Republican primary to replace him is dragged on into a lengthy runoff campaign, so that gives him a head start, basically, and we think that Georgia leans Democratic. Michigan. Senator Gary Peters is retiring in Michigan, and 3 Democrats are vying for the nomination. Now, on one hand, this is an exciting, good race. Dr. Abdul El Sayed, Congressman Haley Stevens, and State Senator Mallory McMorrow. It is a very tight seat, with El Sayed wielding the progressive banner, Stevens hewing closer to the center, and McMorrow somewhere in between them, while critical of Democratic leadership. Now, the problem with Michigan is that primary is in August, and this is getting to be a bit of an ugly race. But those are the Senate seats that Democrats sort of need to keep in order to think about taking over control of the Senate. So let's go back to the battleground map and look at the ones that Democrats hope to flip. Roy Cooper seems to be a strong bet to flip North Carolina. He's in the he's been in politics for 40 years. He's never lost an election, and he wins even in states when Republicans win. We also have Ohio, which is in the lean Republican category. We've got Texas there, and we've got Alaska in the lean Republican category. In Ohio, the former Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is hoping to return to the Senate by ousting the Republican John Husted. This week, Democrats in that state got a big boost because a new Fox News poll has Sherrod Brown 8 points up over Husted, 53 to 45%. That's a very, very big deal, and that makes that possibly winnable for Democrats. Let's move to Texas now. Most forecasters recently downgraded their ratings of this race from likely Republican to lean Republican, as we have it here. It's not that big a difference, but it's a move in favor of Democrats after the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton won the nomination over the incumbent Senator John Cornyn, who used to be thought of as being in the right of the Republican Party, but is now sort of being thought of as being much more moderate. Paxton is not only very far right of Cornyn, he's also plagued by scandal. And the Democratic nominee in that state, the state senator James Tallarico, is comparatively a steady hand. A few polls have shown a tight race, but precedent will tell you that this is still a long shot. But having Tallarico versus Paxton is the kind of race that Democrats would have wanted to have. I want to talk to you for a minute about Alaska. I hate doing this because Alaska's up here, but anyway. Chuck Schumer is more bullish on this state than anyone. The former Congress member from Alaska, Mary Peltola, is running to unseat the Republican Senator Dan Sullivan. Now, Alaska's got a super quirky system. They first hold a nonpartisan primary where the top 4 vote getters advance to the general election, which is then operated by ranked choice voting. In other words, you rank who you want, and the calculation, recalibrates the bottom 2 out of the race, and that's how it gets determined. It's all quite complicated, and it's made a little bit more confusing because there's another man named Dan Sullivan who announced that he's running for Alaska's Senate seat. With a slate of other independents and Democrats on the ballot, any sort of confusion over 2 candidates named Dan Sullivan could actually seriously hurt the sitting Republican senator. Now I want to move over to Iowa for a second. It's another race that we've recently adjusted. I'm going to show you that in a second. We've recently adjusted our rating on recently. On Tuesday, Josh Turek decidedly won the primary for the Senate, 62% versus Zach Walz, who was also a pretty good candidate at 37%. But Josh Turek is thought of as such a strong candidate. By the way, it's a great story. He's a Paralympian. He's such a strong candidate that it's thought that they could actually swing the state, possibly. Turek is a member of Iowa's State House. He's a gold medalist with the U.S. wheelchair basketball team. Donald Trump has won Turek's State House district each time he's run for office, but in between voting for Trump in 2020 and 2024, they elected Turek. A green flag for any candidate looking for an unlikely state to flip. So let's go back to our map and show you how on Tuesday we moved Iowa from likely Republican into lean Republican. And there's one more toss-up race I want to discuss with you, and that is Maine. Things have gotten very complicated in Maine. The Republican Senator Susan Collins has been a long-standing target for Democrats. This cycle, the military veteran and oyster farmer Graham Plattner gained momentum through a grassroots campaign, so much so that the very popular governor, Janet Mills, who was encouraged to run for the Senate seat by Chuck Schumer, suspended her campaign over a lack of enthusiasm compared to the enthusiasm that Plattner had. But in the past few months and then the past couple of weeks, Plattner has walked into a literal buzzsaw of scandal, including allegations of having a Nazi tattoo, which he denied knowing the meaning of and has since covered up, and sending sexually explicit text messages. And in an interview with Chris Hayes this week, here's how he responded to one specific allegation, reported by the New York Times, that he displayed violent behavior with a woman he was dating.
There are some allegations in this piece that I just want to be kind of unequivocal about are simply not true. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of someone who's politically motivated. In this piece, there's a lot about my struggling, not being a good boyfriend, certainly self-medicating with alcohol, and I've been very upfront since the beginning of this campaign that was a pretty dark period of my life after I came back from my combat service, and that's what that kind of life looks like. And so there are things in this that I absolutely will take responsibility for and have been speaking about openly for months now. But those serious allegations are just not true.
Plattner's holding a voter town hall tonight in Maine. This is going to be very interesting. He's likely to face questions from voters. And here's the thing. Voters are going to have a say in this very soon. The primary in Maine for that Senate nomination takes place on Tuesday. And though Janet Mills, the governor, has dropped out, she dropped out too late for her name to be removed from the ballot. So her name will appear on the ballot. If there's a drop in enthusiasm around Plattner, who has so far garnered loyal support, Susan Collins might sleep a little easier. So let's just take Maine out of the equation for a second and look at some pathways for Democrats to take the Senate. If Maine proves too much, and again, we'll know more about this perhaps on Tuesday night, keeping the seats they are defending and flipping for, let's say they do actually flip North Carolina. They'd still need to win in 3 states that we see as either leaning or likely Republican. Ohio is now looking like the strongest bet from that group. Iowa is still tricky. It's possible that Josh Turek is able to flip Iowa. If Texas were to turn blue in November, it would mean that Democrats everywhere are having a good night. It is not likely that Democrats lose in other possible flippable states, but not in Texas. So if you see Texas go blue on November 3rd, then that's a Democratic sweep, and that probably means that the Democrats will control the Senate and the House. But all of this involves going into Donald Trump's backyard and nicking a win. I'm joined now in studio by Christina Greer, political science professor at Fordham University in New York, co-host of the podcast FAQ NYC, and author of the book How to Build a Democracy. I'm also joined by my colleague Steve Bannon. He's an MS Now producer. He is he's a producer of the Rachel Maddow blog and the author of 2 important books, Ministry of Truth and The Imposters. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Professor Greer, let me just start with you because it's not impossible for the Democrats to win the Senate, but it's tricky math. Lots of things have to go right for them.
Right. But we do know in political science that voters go to the polls based on pocketbook issues.
Yeah.
And now more than ever, if Democrats can come up with a cohesive message to help voters understand the reason why they're feeling the strain at the gas tank, the reason why they're feeling the strain at the grocery store, the reason why they're worried about their jobs, the reason why their jobs are no longer there, are not because of Democratic policies, but direct results of Donald Trump, DOJ, and sort of irresponsible policies of the entire Republican Party that have sort of given the keys to the entire country to one man who clearly has bankrupted several businesses, does not understand economics, does not really care about poor people or working class people, as he has said.
Yeah.
And so if Democrats can help voters, all voters, not just theirs, to mobilize them to vote, but also independents and weak-leaning Republicans to say, do you want more of the same? Or not only are you in this position because of Republicans, but we are also presenting a vision. That's the second piece that Democrats tend to struggle with.
Right.
I think if we have that comprehensively, then we can see Democratic strongholds in lots of places, not just Texas. I mean, obviously, Ossoff is working with the infrastructure that Stacey Abrams built over several years.
Yes.
And if you can take that model and think about Ohio and Texas and Maine and places where voters are really struggling, all Americans are really struggling, I think that's the winning strategy.
So, Steve Bannon, putting aside Maine for a second, because Graham Plattner is fully preoccupied with answering questions about the scandals he's been associated with. In the other states, if I'm interviewing Roy Cooper or Alex Vindman in Florida, who's not on our list at the moment as flippable, but he seems to be gaining some ground, or Tallarico, everybody pivots to what Christina just said. Everybody, doesn't matter what question you ask them about Donald Trump and Republicans in the House, they pivot to affordability, cost of living, the fact that the war in Iran is making the price of oil more expensive, the price of food more expensive. It does seem like the Democrats do have that part of the memo, the first part of the memo, and that is about affordability.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I think a year ago at this time, the idea that Democrats were going to be competitive in trying to win the Senate was ridiculous. That it wasn't even a conversation. It wasn't something that people were talking about. You and I were talking about other issues a year ago. This wasn't on the map. But yet, because of the issues that you just identified, because there are so many Americans concerned about the affordability crisis, about not being able to put food on the table, not being able to fill their gas tank, because of those concerns, and because Donald Trump is not literally on the ballot, but is effectively on the ballot as a very unpopular president, and there's this groundswell of opposition to him, backlash that's generating turnout already, we see in Democratic circles. Because of those factors, all of a sudden we're having this conversation because the Senate isn't in play. Plus a net gain of 4 seats is no longer inconceivable. It is now very much a realistic scenario for all the reasons just described.
Christina, what's the second part when you said about what is the cohesive message that Democrats are? You can't just run against Trump. You can't. And Donald Trump, by the way, successfully ran against the argument that Joe Biden had gotten inflation under control. But even that didn't sustain him after he won the election because he wasn't able to fix that. What does the second part of that message look like?
I think this is where Democrats have to walk and chew gum at the same time. One is to make sure voters understand that the affordability crisis is a direct result of Republican policies. But the second piece is where we get a little Tip O'Neill-esque, which is all politics is local. So we need to figure out, in Ohio, is it factories? In Iowa, is it farming? In Georgia, is it what type of industries, plural, are affecting voters most strongly? And so I think that's where the messaging has to be curtailed to the state in a more specific way, and think about the long-term vision of that particular state and what the voters really care about.
Steve Bannon, in primaries, there's not as much polling. In big states like California, Texas, New York, you can get some. In small states like Maine, you get very little. So we have no actual sense of how Maine voters are reacting to, other than anecdotally, to Graham Plattner's situation. But we're going to get a sense of it on Tuesday. There are a bunch of possibilities here. One is that it has very little effect on Maine voters who seem to be overly enthusiastic for Graham Plattner. The second is that it dampens his enthusiasm, and Susan Collins feels better about that whole operation. And the third is that Janet Mills is still on the ballot, and she reminded everybody she's still on the ballot, but she didn't lean into that. She's not started campaigning. We don't have Chuck Schumer, who worked hard to get her to run for that seat, gathering senators around her. So it's very hard to understand what's going to happen on Tuesday night in Maine's Senate primary.
I completely agree. And, I think that Janet Mills had an opportunity to kind of get back into the race with some enthusiasm to say, you know what, if you're concerned about Plattner, vote for me. I'm on the ballot. I want to be competitive here. I think that I can win in November. She had that opportunity, and she let that opportunity pass. She said,
I'm surprised because she's had that opportunity since Wednesday, and she hasn't done it.
That's true. Right. And with time running out, she had that opportunity, and she effectively closed the door by not campaigning, by not trying, by not making any meaningful effort to try and get support in advance of Tuesday's election. And so, in all likelihood, Graham Plattner will almost certainly win that nomination. But as you noted, if those results show that Janet Mills, just as a protest vote, starts to generate some real support, it would suggest that Graham Plattner has additional work to do in the coming months, not only to overcome the scandal, but to overcome the fact that there are going to be so many potential skeptics within his own party between now and the fall.
So the net result for us is I was going to be in here, as I am on every primary night, doing reports into various shows, and we are now actually going to be doing special coverage with the whole team on Tuesday night, because we are now going to watch for all of these clues you just gave us about Maine to see whether that still remains in play for Democrats as a pickup opportunity. Thanks to both of you for being here. Christina Greer is a professor of political science at Fordham University in New York. Steve Bannon is an MS NOW political contributor and producer for The Rachel Maddow Show. All right, coming up, there remains a ceasefire in the Middle East in the war with Iran, although you wouldn't know it judging by the ongoing aerial attacks from the United States and Iran in the region. However, President Trump has dismissed these intermittent exchanges, telling reporters that, quote, in that part of the world, ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner. That's actually what he said. What exactly that means and what it means for the future of the war is next. The fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran was tested once again yesterday. There was a renewed exchange of fire between the U.S. and Iranian forces in the Persian Gulf, even as the Trump administration says it continues to press Iran to make a deal to end the war. Last week, for the first time, we saw the House of Representatives rebuke President Trump's war of choice with Iran by passing a bipartisan vote to end U.S. military action against Iran. Trump fired back on social media on Thursday, saying, quote, in a meaningless vote, the House voted 4 bad Republicans and all of the Democrats to limit my war powers right in the middle of my final negotiations to end the war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Who would do such an unpatriotic thing, end quote. I don't know, maybe people who believe in the separation of powers. The vote is mostly symbolic, by the way, because Trump could ultimately veto any measure that gets through both houses. But this moment does reflect the growing political pressure on Trump and the slipping support for the war within his own party as the midterms approach. And all of this is happening as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth faces yet new scrutiny following reports last week that he personally intervened to cut 9 Navy officers from a promotion list that was vetted by a board of admirals and generals. He reportedly removed all 3 women on the list as well as 2 black men. The other 4 removed were white men. According to the New York Times, it's a move that appears to break the rules governing the Pentagon's promotion system that's supposed to be apolitical and merit-based. Quote, since taking office, Mr. Hegseth has fired or sidelined nearly 36 senior military officers as part of a broader campaign designed to purge the Pentagon of leaders he has disparaged as foolish, reckless, and woke. He has consistently refused to explain why he's chosen to fire officers or pull them from his promotion lists. His scrutiny has fallen heavily on female and minority officers who have borne the brunt of his dismissals, end quote. The Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell responded to the Times report on X, writing in part, as we've said before, military promotions are given to those who have earned them. The department will never consider the color of a service member's skin or their gender as a factor in promotions, end quote. It is notable, though, that he did say that he doesn't like fat people. So it's not that much of a stretch to think he doesn't like women and people of color. For more on this, I'm joined by Kate Conley, former director of counterterrorism at the U.S. National Security Council. She's a decorated U.S. Army veteran, receiving 3 Bronze Stars over the course of 6 deployments. Kate is currently running for Congress in New York's 17th district against Republican Mike Lawler. So I don't know what I want to talk to you about, because your race is really interesting, and I want to talk to you about that. But it doesn't take much. You don't even have to have you can take a quick course on YouTube in statistics and look at who Pete Hegseth is either fired or removed from the line of promotion. It does seem to be disproportionately women and people of color.
Allie, thanks so much for having me. And you were just talking about the importance of taking back the Senate. Let's be very clear where this problem started. Pete Hegseth should never have been confirmed as Secretary of Defense, and he's going to go down as the most incompetent Secretary of Defense in our nation's history. And because of this combination of incompetence and what has really been overt racism and sexism, our American military has lost some of the most capable, competent, and qualified leaders we have. And you see this continued aggression against people who have served our nation, served with honor and dignity and courage and competence. The Department of Navy selected these folks for promotion, right? This was a very merit-based process, as it has always been. And while the statement coming out of the department says the department may never see race or gender as a reason to not promote someone, our Secretary, Hegseth, clearly does. And what we're continuing to see is decisions that are making America less safe. And that is unacceptable.
So you were one of the first women in special ops leadership. You were in Army Special Operations. I mean, you're among the cream of the crop, the elite in the military. Who do things that most of us don't know what you would have been doing, but they are the most important missions that we send our military on. I cannot imagine someone promoted you for any other reason than you were capable of doing that job, because the things we send our special operations people, our Navy SEALs, or our senior military, well-trained military people, they're real things. Right? We have real adversaries in the world. We have real threats. This is just not a thing that has been done casually.
Allie, at the end of the day, the stakes don't get any higher. It is the safety and security of the American people and the lives of American service members. And so in these spaces, in this military where those stakes are what you live with every day, it is performance and qualifications and ability to deliver that matters most. And
did you get any promotion ever that you couldn't meet the standards for because you're a woman?
No. Where we come from, the standard for getting promoted is, are you the best at doing your job? Do you lead well? Can you achieve the mission? That's what the American people should demand and should expect out of its military. And that's what's happening outside of the political influence. But it is the political influence that is undermining the security and stability of this nation, because it's attacking the institution that is the military.
So it's interesting because Pete Hegseth has written a book about his views about the military, in which he does not believe women should be in combat or leadership positions. He has also said diversity is a weakness in the military. Most military experts we talk to say that's not true for a lot of reasons. That you know, but you tell me, you've been in the military. Is diversity a weakness or a strength?
When you talk about the American people delivering the best, most lethal fighting force in the world, in order to get that, you want to draw from 100% of the American population. That means people, regardless of their gender, their skin color, or who they pray to, or who they love. You want the best of the best. So you draw from all. That is how the American military works. It is the ultimate melting pot where the most important thing is competency and the ability to get the mission done. And that knows no gender or no race. And it is the most American thing out there. And that's what's so infuriating about watching Hegseth. Going back to, he does not deserve to hold this job. And when you talk about congressional oversight, yes, we need to rein in the war in Iran, but they also need to rein in Hegseth. He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't continue to be there.
But you keep hearing senators who say, you know, if I knew then what I knew now about Hegseth, I might have voted differently. It's like, what are you talking about? He wrote a book about this. All his views about women and people of color and the military and his tattoo, it was all out there.
Allie, those types of excuses would never have flown in the military, and they certainly don't fly with the American people now. We see through it. In this time in American history where our country needs profiles of courage, we are seeing cowardice. And that is in the Senate, that is in the House, people who continue to give Donald Trump and his corrupt and inept cabinet a blank check. And this is at a time where people are struggling to pay their bills, but Donald Trump gets a blank check. It needs to stop.
You got Mike Lawler you're running against, a Republican who some days acts like a Republican, some days acts like he's one of the MAGA guys, and some days doesn't. How's that working out in the campaign?
At the end of the day, no matter what Mike Lawler tries to say or do, he can't outrun his record. And since he's been elected in November of 2022, it has only been harder for families here in New York 17, in the Hudson Valley, and across the country to put food on their table, keep a roof over their heads, afford health care, or keep the lights on. Mike Lawler is responsible for that failure, and we deserve better. And that's why going out there every day and talking to people, you hear their frustration, Allie. They want real leadership, not more politicians and excuses.
We're going to be watching that race very closely in a couple of weeks in New York in your primaries. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Kate Conley is the former director of counterterrorism on the U.S. National Security Council and congressional candidate for New York's 17th district. All right, coming up, when we debuted the Velshi Band Book Club nearly 5 years ago, we had no idea what it would become. We've held 170-plus meetings over the years with the likes of Judy Blume, Margaret Atwood, Stephen King, Jodi Picoult, Lois Lowry, Roxane Gay, Angie Thomas, Meg Cabot, Jacqueline Woodson, and so many more. Up next, some of my favorite moments from our many important meetings of the Velshi Band Book Club. In response to what felt at the time like an underreported storyline, you had to be paying attention to local news reporting from lots of different places to spot it. It was an alarming pattern of book bans and challenges. You know what happened next. No spoiler alert needed. It turned out we were at the front end of a massive, alarming, and increasingly organized nationwide movement, which has accelerated significantly since 2021 and which poses a very real threat to some of our most dearly held freedoms. So we joined the fight for freedom to read and to write and to think, calling out our shared mission, reading as resistance. But as we joined this battle, something else happened. A few weeks of the Velshi Band Book Club, after the first Velshi Band Book Club meeting in 2021, we moved past incremental coverage of book bans and censorship and more fully into the literature that was being targeted. The stories of book bans are basically the same story over and over again for centuries, literally. Book bans are all targeted for the same reasons, largely by political actors who've not read the books and are raging against gender, sexuality, radical representation, sexual content. But talking to authors about their stories, about the literature, was a different and powerful experience every week. We realized that these novels, these stories that cut across every genre, from memoirs to graphic novels to classics, picked up where news coverage could no longer go. These stories brought texture and color and emotion to our show. If the news stories we've covered tell you what happened, the novels read together told you how it felt. These authors, in the pages of their books, answered questions that the news simply couldn't answer, like, what does the sting of racism feel like when you're a young black boy? What does it feel like to fall in love when you're queer? What does it take to remain powerful when you're coming of age as a young woman? What does classic literature still mean? As you may know, this is my last weekend hosting Velshi. Starting June 15th, I'll be taking over as the host of the 11th hour, Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. And the Velshi Band Book Club will be coming with me. But on my last Sunday hosting this show, where the Velshi Band Book Club was created, I wanted to share some of my favorite moments from the 170-plus meetings with incredible authors who've helped us understand the power of literature. Today's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club is officially underway. I am joined by a great friend and founding member, literally, of the Velshi Band Book Club, George M. Johnson. One of the things you first said to me when people were banning All Boys Aren't Blue, they said this is not appropriate for people of a certain age. And you said, but the things you write about, you experienced at certain ages.
Walking this life without any guidance sometimes can be really, really hard, especially when you're a young black queer kid and you don't really have, visibility or representation anywhere, and you also don't see it in the characters you read. And I always find it funny because I read books with a lot of heterosexual characters, and it never made me want to become heterosexual. So the reverse is not going to happen when students read books about queer characters. It's not going to necessarily make them queer, but if they are already experiencing those things that I already went through, wouldn't it be nice that they had some guidance? Wouldn't it be nice that they knew about their history, the legacies that came before us, so that they can take more pride in themselves?
The reason that my books tend to be banned is because, like a lot of the books that have been banned by LGBTQ and BIPOC authors, what they tend to do is encourage readers to think for themselves, and that is a very dangerous thing. This is kind of what book banners have moved into. They started with LGBTQ books and authors and BIPOC books and authors, and now they're starting to look at what they call mature content, and that's anything that they find objectionable. The reason this is dangerous for most of the people watching your show is because they're not just stopping at the school library level.
Right.
Public library challenges have increased 92%. They're coming for the books that you read.
One of the things we talk about with authors, particularly who write for young adults, is the degree to which they feel that their writing has influenced young people. You've got a pile of letters there. Some of them are 15 plus years old. Can you read from one of them for us?
I would happily read for one of them. I can finally say what I've been thinking and feeling. I literally just finished The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and it made me think about so many things. It gave me a sense of hope. I was lost and confused for so long when my dad died and left me to face life alone. Things snapped. I started doing things I wish I never did to myself. The scars and burns still show vividly. I'm so ashamed because of them. Last night, I had written letters to the people I love. About how sorry I was that I was leaving them. I feel like I betrayed everyone because I planned on killing myself today. I was so ready to swallow the pills and just let my heart give out, but reading The Perks of Being a Wallflower gave me a reason to not kill myself.
Bravery is one of those concepts that feels bigger than it actually is, especially for young people. When you think of bravery, they may think of superheroes. Or something like that. But sometimes bravery, the best bravery is found in the smallest acts. Sometimes it just means stepping out of your comfort zone. Sometimes bravery means, yes, I am shaking, I am trembling, but I'm going to push forward to do what I believe is right.
Yeah, I think that most people are good. I think that when you see, for instance, a car rolling downhill, or you see somebody, a child in the road, and that car is going to hit them. It doesn't matter who is a Trump supporter, who is a Republican, who is a Democrat. Everybody gets together and immediately they do that. They save that child. If there's a burning building, there's no question that people are going to club together to get those people out. So I think, and you can call me a romantic if you want to, but I think that most people are inherently good and they try to do their best.
We are the same species, right? And that despite that overwhelming sameness, despite the fact that we are all on this 10-minute train ride between two infinities from which either end no one can report, right? Despite the fact of that overwhelming sameness and the brevity of our being here, we create these reasons to be mad at each other, right?
When I became a teenager, out of the camps and asking questions,